Good afternoon, Who Dat Nation, and a happy Wednesday afternoon to our Bayou Blitz family. I am Bob Rose. I'm one of your co-hosts to your Bayou Blitz, your 100th episode of your Bayou Blitz. Joining me and celebrating and bringing you kind of an early bird special of your show is Brendan Boylan. Brendan Boylan, happy 100th episode to you, my friend.
Yeah, you as well. It's kind of crazy we've already done 100.
Yeah.
That means that the people viewing must kind of like us a little bit. Maybe they're being forced to watch. I don't know. But thank you guys for. We're secretly paying people, so our numbers look good.
Blink twice if you're being forced to watch the Bayou Blitz.
But yeah, happy 100 episodes. Happy to knock that accomplishment off. It means a lot because we've worked together for a long time, and I think having this show kind of come to fruition was in the works for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
So it's nice to see this, be a steady, smooth success to this point. Hopefully, hundreds more episodes down the road. We joked before, right? Like we're going to go well past Bob having to do this broadcast in a nursing home.
So, oh yeah, I can't wait for that backdrop.
That's going to be great. Nurse bringing you pudding in the middle of the podcast. It's going to be awesome. But thanks, you guys, for tuning in. We're going to keep it a little short today, too. But we wanted to talk about some NFL draft needs for the Saints. Celebrate 100 episodes. Didn't want to, let this week go by without, celebrating 100 episodes. We're also going to be posting on Twitter. As I teased last week, we have another Super Bowl 44 edition Drew Brees Funko Pop to be giving away online. So make sure you follow Bayou Blitz Pod on Twitter or X or whatever it's called for that giveaway. But Bob, NFL draft, we kind of talked about it last week and some of the needs the Saints have, specifically one very glaring need all of a sudden after some news on Ryan Ramczyk and Andrus Peat still being a free agent. The Saints haven't signed a tackle of major newsworthy news to this point. Are they going to run with Trevor Penning? There's a lot of questions up in the air. A lot of those questions would be solved and answered with selecting an offensive tackle 14. So we've already talked about that, right? We've already discussed that. Bob and I are going to have so many prospects to talk about over the next few weeks, along with that marathon of a stream that we have for you at the end of the month for our yearly draft show. So, Bob, I kind of want to talk about today some underrated positions of need for the Saints that could be addressed through the NFL draft. And I want to start with the spiciest one first. And that's people who are asking, should the Saints draft a quarterback this year? We've been talking about that point for years now, Bob. Years with a Z. I know where my answer lies. I think between the two of us and how well we know each other and our views and where we stand on things with this roster, it's probably going to be similar. So, Bob, let's see, that's a weird way. Do I have to address the question as, do the Saints need a quarterback to draft a quarterback, or should the Saints draft a quarterback? I'll go with the lighter one. Should the Saints draft a quarterback with any selection?
Should they? Should they? Absolutely. Will they? Not in day one or day two. They are determined to move forward with Derek Carr as their quarterback. I say for about the millionth time this offseason. But I do believe that the Saints could and probably will, if there's one that they like, draft a quarterback in day three. As we know, Clint Kubiak, Gary Kubiak, Mike Shanahan, Kyle Shanahan offensive system. They have, Jerry, that's the older of my two pups, and I'm gonna throw something at her if she doesn't stop. The Kubiak Shanahan offensive system has had a long track record of success stories at the quarterback position. From late round draft choices or kind of unheralded veterans. And I'm not saying that the Saints will draft a guy in day 3 in hopes or expectations that said quarterback will replace Derek Carr. I'm just saying, you look at the most recent success, Brock Purdy, Clint Kubiak's success with Kirk Cousins, and we can go on and on. I think that as long as the Saints get the needs addressed that they want earlier rounds, you will see them take a quarterback if Clint sees one who he believes can fit his system well. And there are a couple who I think are intriguing prospects that could potentially be available in day 3. But folks, I know a lot of you want Derek Carr replaced. It ain't going to happen this year. It's not. I know a lot of you are praying Jaden Daniels falls, or maybe you're in love with Michael Penix, and I could see why. You 2 or 3 Bo Nix fans that are out there, or insane JJ McCarthy fans. It ain't going to happen. New Orleans is going to go another direction with their first round pick, going to go another direction in day 2. And if the Saints draft a quarterback, it won't be until day 3, period.
I know this is going to be a shocker to everybody who's a consistent watcher, and thank you to the 115 of you watching midday. Like, a lot of you guys are still at work, so we appreciate that. We are much more important than whatever office duties you have going on right now. But shocker to everybody, Bob and I are on the same page here. The Saints aren't going to draft a quarterback day 1 or day 2. I know I have some quarterbacks that I like. I'll go ahead and throw the name out. I think Jordan Travis would be intriguing if you see him there in the 5th, 6th, 7th round, wherever he falls. A lot of questions about his fractured leg, but I think that's an interesting one. I think it's also going to show a lot about how the Saints feel about Jake Haener.
Yeah.
And Bob continued to reference Kubiak and his success with quarterbacks. You also have to remember, though it's the same head coach that drafted Jake Haener, it's not the same offensive system that drafted Jake Haener. So if Kubiak goes, you know what, like, I don't know if Haener can play my system the way that I want him to, then maybe he does look for a quarterback. And that's just speculation right now. I'm sure those guys have already met up.
I want to interrupt you there real quick, and I agree with your point completely, but I do think that it's telling about how Clint Kubiak feels about Jake Haener by the signing of Nathan Peterman instead of a real number 2 quarterback. I think that in itself shows at least some level of confidence in Jake Haener's ability to run this system if asked to do so in a pinch. But otherwise, I mean, I do agree with you. And, typically coaches, whether they're position coaches, coordinators, or the head man, typically they want their people in place when they take over a job. And I mean, hell, why wouldn't they? This is, again, their job, their livelihood, their paychecks on the line here. You want the people in place, to do the job, to make sure that you have a job going forward.
Exactly. So I'm not sure whether or not we're going to see the Saints draft a quarterback. I could definitely see, and we've talked about this before too, we could see the Saints get one as an undrafted free agent. If they do draft a quarterback, it's going to be in one of those later rounds. But they do have 3 quarterbacks on the roster right now. So I think simply, should the Saints draft a quarterback? They probably should. I think it's always good to have like as many bodies in the quarterback room as possible that you think could be competent NFL quarterbacks. Do they draft a quarterback, or do they need to draft a quarterback? The answer would be no, they do not need to. Should they? I'm always in favor. And listen, the Saints, again, different coaching staff, different regime, but the Saints have a history of drafting those late-round quarterbacks just to see what happens, going all the way back to Tyler Palko, Sean Canfield. I'm missing people, but there's a list there, right? You can go all the way back to 2006, like I said, with Palko, and continue on. The Saints typically bring somebody in. Before we move to the next position, thanks, John Butler. Kind of out of the blue, I don't know. Maybe something got posted that I don't know about, but I appreciate it. We are going out to
the mini bombshell was dropped last night on Under the Dome.
Oh, mini bombshell. I know. Anyway, we appreciate that. I appreciate the well wishes, and Jerry as well. We're actually going out That's why we're doing an early episode, because we are going out to do some food and cake tasting down in Florida. I know, fancy. Who doesn't want to be in nice warm weather right about now? So, Bob, another position that we came into the offseason with some concerns about was defensive end. With the signing of Chase Young, even with some of the concerns about his neck, I think a lot of that has been answered. You and I have talked at length at times about the underrated depth the Saints have at defensive end following that signing. And a lot of that just falls back on, well, a lot of people forgot about Carl Granderson because he had such a hot start and then kind of fell off. Haven't seen a lot out of Isaiah Foskey out of his rookie year. And Peyton Turner still lingering around somewhere. And can provide some depth to the position as well. I no longer think that's the biggest defensive need for the New Orleans Saints in the draft. But, Bob, you may think that there is a position that does need a little bit of extra attention. We've talked about safety before, but I think that linebacker may be an underrated draft need for the New Orleans Saints. And I'm talking about a potential third or fourth round pick used on a linebacker. What say you?
Yeah, I agree with that. And I said it coming into the offseason, and I spoke about Willie Gay as a name to watch as a potential free agent addition. And lo and behold, the Saints did sign Willie Gay. But remember, folks, that's just to a 1-year contract. Demario Davis is still 35 years old. He's still going into his 13th season, still playing at a high level, grant you. And no, I haven't forgotten about Pete Werner, you Werner fans or Ohio State Buckeye fans. But Werner is a good downhill linebacker. He's a good in the box linebacker. You put Pete in space, and a lot of vulnerability shows, and not only shows in his play, but is affected throughout the defense. Therefore, if the Saints, not as a first round pick, but even as early as 45, I would not be mad at all if the Saints brought in a guy like Peyton Wilson from NC State, Cedric Gray from North Carolina, Jeremiah Trotter from Clemson. Those are the top 3 linebackers on my board. Edgerrin Cooper from Texas A&M is another one. Maybe a Junior Colson from Michigan. All of those guys I expect to go in day 2, the second or third round. You might even see a guy like Wilson or Trotter sneak into the latter stages of round 1. If the Saints brought in one of these guys, every single one of them that I named, and I do have an article that I posted on Saints News Network profiling 3 of them in one piece this afternoon. Every single one of those linebackers that I just named, by my view, have the potential of an every down, every situation linebacker. Good in pass coverage, effective blitzer, very good against the run, with a high football IQ. In other words, the athletic ability, the agility, and the awareness and football IQ to play that a demanding role that the Saints usually ask out of their linebackers. So, while I will acknowledge that with the signing of Willie Gay, a player I really like, it's not necessarily an immediate need. But it is one that could still bolster the defense instantly and provide the answer for an heir apparent to Demario Davis, whether it's next year or in 2 or 3 years from now.
And I'm glad you brought that last point up, because Willie Gay, I thought, was a type of signing for the Saints, a guy that really fit their needs. But Bob mentioned 1-year contract. You never know how those things are going to go, right? He could be the answer that the Saints were looking for, but on a 1-year deal, not be in the black and gold a season from now. So that's a concern. Demario Davis still playing at an elite level, not even a good level, not even a high level, an elite level. But he is 35. Pete Werner cannot slide over and do the things that Demario Davis does should there be an injury or Davis retires abruptly or something, right? So I do think that there is a need there. You named 3 guys from the Carolinas right out the gate. So me being me, I really like that. There is good linebacker talent that I don't think the Saints have to necessarily reach for this year. They can't sit back and wait for guys to fall in the lap in day 3, but there are some guys in that second and third round that I think could fill a need. I know what you guys are thinking. Well, Brendan, the Saints don't have picks in certain rounds. They have like a bazillion 5th-round picks. Like, they will move up at some point. I think I referenced the Adam Troutman trade the last show that we did, where they trade everything day 3 to move back into day 2. I could see the Saints doing something like that as well. But Brian Russell says underwhelming depth at defensive end. So I do want to talk about that a little bit. And we've discussed this before, and I think Bob and I have similar views, but views that don't necessarily align on maybe 3 levels. My thing with defensive end, and especially not using a day 1 or day 2 pick on defensive end, or I should say 1st or 2nd round, maybe a 3rd round, is that you've already invested in Isaiah Foskey, a 2nd-round pick a year ago. You really didn't see a whole lot in him, right? Yes, Cam Jordan's getting older. Yes, Chase Young's also on a 1-year deal, and you don't know what's going to happen with that. Carl Granderson, you just paid a lot of money to. So you do have, a little bit there, but to go invest another high-round pick, to me, is it's the definition of insanity, is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different answer, because the Saints did it with Davenport, the Saints did it with Turner, now the Saints have done it with Isaiah Foskey. And so far, and Foskey's still very young, so I don't want to make it sound like we're saying anything negative about the future potential of Foskey, but we didn't see him a lot last year. Whether that be his own, whether that be his own doing with injury, injuries aren't his fault, but whether it be injury, whether it be just not being able to crack the rotation. Like, there's a lot of things that came into play last year for Isaiah. But why invest another high pick when you haven't seen it come to fruition, when you just paid a lot of money to Chase Young? Cameron Jordan's still, Cameron Jordan. You gave a lot of money to Carl Granderson, and then you got 2 young guys. And I'll throw Peyton Turner in that conversation too. You have Foskey and Peyton Turner, who both have something to prove. Foskey in year 2 and Turner in the last year of his rookie contract. So for me, that's why I don't value that as high as maybe a linebacker, maybe even safety.
Yeah, and I'll agree with most of that. I will acknowledge, Brian, that there are a lot of everybody that Brendan just named on the depth chart. Everybody except Granderson were, 1st-round picks, 1st or 2nd-round picks were highly regarded players. And Granderson is the best of the bunch, at least if you go off the production, most recent production from last year. But the big ifs are this. What about Chase? If Chase Young is going to recover, make a full recovery from neck surgery. If Chase Young is going to show why he was the 2nd overall pick a few years ago, he really hasn't, not since his rookie year anyway. If Peyton Turner can stay healthy, he hasn't, not in 4 years, not in 3 years, excuse me. If Isaiah Foskey can make that big jump in year 2, and everybody that follows me knows that I was a big fan of Foskey coming into last year's draft, and I'm not ready to give up on him. But the fact remains that he didn't do anything in year 1. Now, having said that, there's a lot of edge rushers, top tier edge rushers, if you look throughout the league, that did not have virtually nothing as a rookie. Cam Jordan being one of them. Will Isaiah Foskey make that big jump in year 2? I think he has the ability, but again, that's a big if. Cam Jordan. If Cam Jordan can return to the high level that we're used to. So there are a lot of ifs at this position. And as a result, again, if the Saints draft an edge rusher that they like and fits their style in the 2nd round, it's not going to happen in the 1st. The signing of Chase Young took care of that. But if they see one that they really like in the 2nd round, I know that crowds that depth chart, but I wouldn't be mad at it, and I could see the logic behind it. Now, having said that, I think as soon as they signed Chase Young, for me, the shift, the priority shift for me then went from defensive end to defensive tackle. I would love to see them grab a Tavondre Sweat from Texas, a Leonard Williams from Miami, just a big guy that can just automatically tie up 2 to 3 blockers in the middle. That would then give your other guys, the guys that we just mentioned, plus Brian Brissy, more one-on-one blocking opportunities. And I think that would just that would benefit the entire defense, even back through the linebacking core. So I will acknowledge the defensive end is not nearly as big a need on paper, that favorite saying of ours, but it still wouldn't completely shock me if the Saints went for one in day 2.
Let's talk, because you said defensive tackle. Let's talk about it. You know, the Saints brought in 2 in free agency a year ago, and they used their first-round pick on a defensive tackle, and Brian Brissy, who played pretty well his rookie year. So, with that said, Saunders seemed to take a little bit of dip in production towards the end of the year. Shepard has his strengths, but Shepard certainly has his weaknesses as well. What are the odds the Saints find as you said, almost with a guy like Sweat, a permanent running mate with Brissy in this year's draft?
I'd say they're good. Nathan Shepard is a workman-like player, but there's a ceiling on the production that you're going to get from him. Kalen Saunders, while everybody loved when he came in on offense as a fullback last year, as a defensive player, he did next to nothing. But you've lost Malcolm Roach, and you're already rather thin there. And outside of Brissy, and I like Shepard and Saunders, I do, but they are what they are. They are not dynamic players. They are not difference makers in the middle. So as a result, I'm not going to say to expect it in the first round, but it would not shock me whatsoever if that's where the Saints went with their second round pick, especially if a guy like Sweat or maybe a Byron Murphy, from Sweat's running mate at Texas, or even Leonard Taylor, Braden Fisk from Florida State, or some other players that I've watched at defensive tackle. Any of those guys, again, Sweat's my favorite because he is that Tony Saragusa, Sam Adams, Vita Vea, Ty Gilbert Brown, as Alan Ulrich pointed out last night. He is that type of player that he's not going to fill up a stat sheet, but he's going to fill up those middle gaps on the offensive line, tie up blockers, push a pass pocket backwards, and just with his mere presence, automatically clog up inside running lanes. That's why I'd like to see a guy like Sweat or another space eater in the middle. Could happen as early as round 2. If it doesn't, I think that we would almost certainly expect it to happen somewhere in day 3, where again they just get a big bodied there.
Let's move to the offensive side. Not a whole lot of time left today, since we're running a little bit of a shorter episode today. I'm to blame for that. I'll take the blame today. Isn't that nice, Bob, to not have the blame put on you for one day?
It feels weird.
Yeah, I know. I'll take it for you. Let's talk about offense. For an offense that struggled mightily at times a year ago, I don't, outside of offensive tackle, I don't feel like we're having a lot of conversations, and not just us, but Saints media, or even national media, about offensive needs for the New Orleans Saints. I think that it's kind of hushed down a lot outside of the needs on offensive line, because on paper, our favorite saying, the Saints offense should be pretty good next year. Bob, for the people that are not talking about it, what is one position that's not offensive tackle that is being mightily overlooked as a need for the Saints to address via the draft or phase 27 of free agency?
Big body pass catcher. And you have seen some mock drafts, address that for the Saints, both at our Saints News Network and national. A lot of it in the second round, but you see some of it in the first too. Chris Olave, A.T. Perry, Rashid Shaheed, they're a dynamic trio. And A.T. Perry has the physical stature, 6'5", 205, 210 pounds. But he's not that big-bodied physical guy that Michael Thomas is. I know Michael Thomas has been off the field more than he's been on it the last 3 or 4 years. I get that. But when you have a player like that can do what Michael Thomas does, just dominate those intermediate zones, be a security blanket for for your quarterback. That frees up so much opportunity for your other playmakers, and that's where the Saints are lacking right now. Not to mention receiver depth in general. Cedric Wilson, the free agent signing from Miami, I think is an underrated addition. But again, he's a guy that's built and has a lot of the same skill sets as Olave and as Shaheed does, just a little bit slower. So maybe a Keon Coleman from Florida State. If you're looking for a surprise first-round draft choice at 14th overall, outside of the offensive tackle, Brock Bowers' name, the tight end from Georgia, gets thrown around a lot, and for good reason. But maybe Rome Odunze, the big wideout from Washington, could be another head turner. That would surprise a lot of people. If you're looking into later rounds. Xavier Legette, the big body wideout from South Carolina, Johnny Wilson, maybe a day 3 prospect, Keon Coleman's teammate at Florida State, tight end. Theo Johnson from Penn State, a guy who I absolutely love at the position. Jatavion Sanders from Texas, another tight end. Just an athletic guy. And same with Theo Johnson and Brock Bowers, obviously. A guy that Clint Kubiak could do so much with offensively. But when I say big body pass catcher, I'm not necessarily referring to only wide receiver, although expect at least 2 to be taken in the draft process, either as a draft choice or an undrafted free agent, because they only have 5 under contract right now. That's not getting talked about enough.
For me, I'm going to select tight end. You already mentioned Brock Bowers. We've talked about how Brock Bowers would be almost like a dream for the New Orleans Saints offense, especially if you're playing in a little bit of a Madden world. However, 2 problems with that. 1, I don't know if he makes it to 14.
Right.
2, even if he makes it to 14, you have a much bigger glaring need. And you have a lot of different options. You can go at offensive tackle, and one of the big 3 offensive tackles should be there at 14 for you. If you want to call it big 3, but guys that are, supposed to be in that area. So I think that Bowers is off the table. I think there are some talented tight ends in this draft that you might be able to get in round 3, round 4. Or even an early day 3 pick. With that said, I think Juwan Johnson as a pass-catching tight end is really good for the New Orleans Saints. He had a down year last year. Foster Moreau, I think, gives you everything you want out of your tight end too, but it'd be nice if New Orleans had a guy that could be tight end 1 that could do a little bit of both. That's my biggest knock on Juwan, that he's not a guy that can really line up, pass protect, go out and be super duper physical. Obviously, a guy who was a receiver first and then a tight end second, you kind of see those characteristics and qualities. With that said, I don't know if the Saints really go after a guy to be the true tight end 1 moving forward, right. But I think it is an underrated position of need that's not offensive tackle. So, with all that said, Bob, with the last few minutes here, I want you to throw out a name of a prospect on the off. We spent a lot of time defensively today, but I want to hear one prospect on the offensive side of the ball that is not an offensive tackle that you would like to see the Saints grab in this draft. Any round, maybe a player that people are not super familiar with.
You said offensive player?
That's correct.
I'm gonna cheat as I normally do. I mentioned Rome Odunze, and I do love him, but I really think the Saints will and should go after tackle in the first round. But I already mentioned the lack of depth at receiver, so I would love to see the Saints bring in one of Odunze's teammates, Jalen Polk or Jalen McMillan. Both wideouts at Washington, both extremely productive guys. One is a speed threat take the top off of defense. The other is more of a run after the catch guy, take a short pass and just take it the distance. Both are very adept at all three levels, making catches, making plays at all three levels of the defense, and came from a fairly fairly pro-ready Washington Husky system. So yeah, McMillan or Polk from Washington. I would love to see the Saints get either one of these guys.
I'll cheat a little bit too. I'll go on the defensive side since you went offensive. You already talked about it. When you go back and you watch the film on why Texas was so successful this season, a lot of it had to do with those guys in the middle. It's not a super big need for the Saints, right? We already talked about that. Defensive tackle is not the biggest glaring need, but getting a guy like Sweat, a guy that you would call a game breaker, would do so much for the New Orleans Saints. And in all honesty, take Cameron Jordan out of the equation, Bob. When's the last time the Saints have had a true game breaker on the defensive line? It's been a long, long time. I don't know. Honestly,
Hazlitt's defensive line with our friend Willie Whitehead, Leroy Glover, Joe Johnson. That group would be the last one that I could really think of. Sheldon Rankins looked like he was headed that direction until he blew out his Achilles, but didn't quite get there.
Yeah, so I think that could make a huge difference for a Saints defense that, while they've been pretty good over the years, man, if they could get back to being like a top 5 quality defense with the talent on the other side of the ball, I think the Saints could really do some damage, not just in the NFC South, but find themselves in a position to potentially, compete for the NFC. That is thinking way far ahead, but if the Saints could find themselves in a position where they're one of the elite defenses, they have enough talent on the offensive side of the ball to make it happen. With all that, that concludes our 100th episode. It is also the most people we've ever had live with us at one time.
Nice.
So thank you guys. I guess that's a little pat on the back for us making it to 100 shows. But Bob, a lot of draft stuff to cover. You're covering it all. 7,000 prospects' names. Everybody that may or may not get drafted. So with that said, where can people follow you and your work and your articles as we inch closer and closer to our favorite day of the year?
Yeah, definitely the most trying 3-day stretch of the year. But folks, I echo Brendan's sentiment. Thank you for joining us, on your Bayou Blitz. And make sure, if you aren't already, or if you know Saints fans that aren't, make sure you steer your way or steer them the way of the Bayou Blitz Facebook page and Bayou Blitz Twitter group, at Bayou Blitz Pod. We're hoping, as the months go on, to do some exclusive content on just that Facebook page and just that Twitter page, maybe a couple extra shows, things like that. So make sure you do that. In the meantime, you can follow me personally, Bob Rose, over on Facebook, at BobbyR2613 on Twitter. And obviously, if you've known me, then you already know this. I do write for the Saints News Network, at Saints News on Twitter. And not only myself, but John Hendricks, Kyle Mosley, Ross Jackson. We're churning out draft pieces, draft expectation pieces. I'm finally, after being delayed by free agency and coaching hires, and publishing issues, I'm finally churning out, a few of the draft prospect analysis that I have spent so much film study on, starting late in this season. So make sure you check those out as well.
And for myself, you can follow me over on Twitter and virtually everything at BT Boylan. We do have our, what do we call it, marathon coming up when it comes to the NFL draft. We're super excited about that. Super excited for another 100 episodes of the Bayou Blitz. So thanks so much for tuning in with us today. Check us out on Twitter at Bayou Blitz Pod. We will be doing a giveaway for that Super Bowl 44 champions Drew Brees Funko. That is our gift to you guys for helping us get to 100 shows. So until next week at our normal time, 9 p.m., we sign off for now. Thanks so much for tuning in to the Bayou Blitz podcast. Until then, find some peace, spread love, practice positivity. See you then.